Let me tell you about a lie that lasted 40 years. A lie told by doctors, by scientists, by the United States government. A lie that killed dozens of men and destroyed hundreds of lives. And the worst part? It was all done in the name of science. This is the story of the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. 40 years of medical racism. 40 years of human beings used as guinea pigs. 40 years of suffering that could have been prevented with a single dose of penicillin. By the time it ended, the people responsible called it research. But there's another word for what happened in Tuskegee, Alabama. Murder. It starts in 1932. Picture rural Alabama, the Deep South. The Great Depression is crushing the country. People are desperate, hungry. And in Macon County, where most of the population is black sharecroppers, things are even worse. Healthcare, forget about it. Most black families in the area had never seen a doctor in their lives. They couldn't afford it. And even if they could, most white doctors wouldn't treat them anyway. Then one day, something remarkable happened. Government doctors showed up. Official representatives from the United States Public Health Service. And they had an offer. Free medical examinations. Free treatment. Free meals on examination days. Even burial insurance. All you had to do was sign up for a study about bad blood. Now, bad blood was a term used in the black community to describe all sorts of ailments. Fatigue, aches and pains, anemia, syphilis. People didn't really know what it meant. It was just a catch-all phrase for feeling sick. So when these government doctors offered free health care, people jumped at the chance. Who wouldn't? 600 men enrolled. 399 had syphilis. 201 didn't. They were the control group. The men thought they were being treated. They thought the government was finally helping them. They had no idea they were part of an experiment, and they definitely had no idea what that experiment really was. Here's what the Public Health Service told the men. You have bad blood. We're going to treat you. Come in for examinations. Take these pills. Let us do these tests. And in return, you'll get free health care. Simple. Generous even. Here's what they didn't tell them. The pills were placebos, sugar pills. The treatments were just examinations to document the progression of untreated syphilis. The spinal taps they performed, which they called special treatments, were just to study what the disease was doing to their nervous systems. Nobody was being treated. Nobody was being cured. The researchers wanted to see what happened when syphilis went untreated. They wanted to document every stage of the disease. From infection to death, they wanted to watch these men die. And why? What was so important about this research? Here's where it gets even more disturbing. The researchers believed that syphilis affected black people differently than white people. They thought it attacked the cardiovascular system more in black patients and the nervous system more in white patients. They wanted to prove this theory. In other words, they wanted to prove that black people and white people were biologically different. That they weren't really equal, not even medically. It was scientific racism dressed up as research. Now you might be thinking, surely someone noticed. Surely someone objected. Surely someone said this was wrong. People did notice. And here's the thing that makes this story even more horrific. They kept going anyway. In 1943, penicillin became the standard treatment for syphilis. It was a miracle drug. Simple. Effective. It could cure syphilis completely. The men in the Tuskegee study didn't get it. When World War II started and men were being drafted, the study participants were supposed to get treatment as part of their military physicals. The researchers intervened. They made sure the men weren't treated. When local doctors tried to treat study participants who came to them, the researchers stopped them. They told the doctors these men were part of a special study and shouldn't receive treatment. When public health programs came to Macon County offering free syphilis treatment, the researchers made sure their study participants weren't included. Again and again, for 40 years, these men were deliberately denied treatment. Treatment that could have saved their lives. Treatment that would have cost almost nothing. The researchers chose to let them suffer instead. Let me tell you about some of the men. Charlie Pollard. He was one of the first to enroll. He was 27 years old, working as a farmer, trying to support his family. He trusted the government doctors. He came to every examination, took every placebo pill they gave him, had painful spinal taps performed on him. He lived with untreated syphilis for 40 years. It destroyed his body, his health, his life. Herman Shaw. He enrolled when he was 31. He believed he was getting the best medical care available. He was proud to be part of what he thought was a treatment program. He told his friends about the government doctors who were helping him. He didn't find out the truth until 1972, until he was 71 years old, until after the damage was irreversible. These weren't just statistics. They were real people, fathers, husbands, sons, community members, human beings who trusted their government and got betrayed. By the end of the study, 28 men had died directly from syphilis. Another 100 died from complications related to the disease. 40 of their wives had been infected. 19 of their children were born with congenital syphilis. All preventable. All unnecessary. And here's something that makes this even more chilling. The study wasn't secret. It wasn't hidden in some classified government facility. The researchers published papers about it. 13 papers in medical journals between 1936 and 1973. They presented their findings at medical conferences. They discussed it openly in the medical community. Doctors read these papers. Scientists knew about the study. Nobody stopped it. In 1969, a committee reviewed the study and decided it should continue. In 1969, 26 years after penicillin became available, they looked at what was happening and said, "Let's keep going." How does that happen? How do doctors, who have taken an oath to do no harm, decide that watching men die is acceptable? The answer is the same as always. Racism. Dehumanization. The belief that these black men's lives mattered less than the data they could provide. The study might have continued forever, if not for one man. Peter Buxton. He was an investigator for the Public Health Service. And in 1966, he found out about the Tuskegee study. He was horrified. He filed an official complaint. He said the study was unethical and needed to be stopped immediately. His superiors disagreed. They said the study was important, valuable, it needed to continue. Buxton tried again in 1968. He wrote another complaint, more detailed, more forceful. Again, nothing changed. So in 1972, Buxton did something desperate. He leaked the story to the press. On July 25, 1972, the Washington Star ran a front-page story. Human guinea pigs, syphilis patients died untreated. The next day, the New York Times picked it up. Then the whole country. The public was outraged. Congress launched an investigation. And suddenly, after 40 years, the Tuskegee Syphilis Study was finally over. The congressional hearings revealed the full scope of what had happened. Senator Edward Kennedy called it a nightmare and said it had turned into a death sentence for the men involved. The testimonies were damning. Researchers admitted they had never planned to treat the men. They admitted they had actively prevented treatment. They admitted they had misled the participants about the true nature of the study. In 1973, the government settled a class action lawsuit. $9 million split among the survivors and their families. It wasn't nearly enough. You can't put a price on 40 years of suffering. In 1997, President Bill Clinton issued a formal apology. He said, "The United States government did something that was wrong, deeply, profoundly, morally wrong." He was right. But the apology came too late for most of the men. By 1997, only 8 of the original study participants were still alive. Herman Shaw was one of them. He was 94 years old. He attended the ceremony at the White House. He accepted the apology. But he never forgot. And he never fully forgave. The legacy of Tuskegee reaches far beyond those 600 men. It shattered trust between the black community and the medical establishment. trust that still hasn't been rebuilt. Today, Black Americans are less likely to participate in medical studies, less likely to trust doctors, less likely to seek preventive care. And when you ask why, Tuskegee is almost always part of the answer. Can you blame them? For 40 years, their government used Black men as lab rats. 40 years of doctors lying to patients. 40 years of science used as a weapon. That kind of betrayal doesn't heal in a generation. The Tuskegee study is why we have informed consent laws now. It's why institutional review boards exist. It's why medical ethics committees scrutinize research involving human subjects. Those safeguards exist because of what happened in Alabama. They're written in the suffering of those 600 men. But here's the question that haunts me about this story. How many people were involved? How many people knew what was happening and did nothing? Dozens of researchers. Hundreds of medical professionals, local doctors who were told not to treat certain patients, nurses who administered the placebos, public health officials who reviewed the study and approved its continuation. All of them made a choice. Every day, for 40 years, they chose to let it continue. And most of them never faced any consequences. No one went to jail. No one lost their medical license. The researchers retired comfortably. The institutions involved faced no real penalties. There was an apology, there was a settlement, but there was no justice. There's a memorial now in Tuskegee. It has the names of all the men who were part of the study, a place to remember, to honor, to mourn. But memorials aren't enough, because the attitudes that made the Tuskegee study possible, they didn't disappear in 1972. Medical racism didn't end with an apology. Black women are still 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than white women. Black patients still receive less pain medication than white patients with the same conditions. Black communities still have less access to quality health care. The specifics have changed, but the underlying problem, the belief that some lives matter less than others, that's still there. Every medical student learns about Tuskegee now. It's taught as a cautionary tale. An example of everything research should never be. But I wonder if we're learning the right lessons. Because Tuskegee wasn't an aberration. It wasn't one rogue study that somehow slipped through the cracks. It was systematic, institutional. It was racism embedded in the very structure of American medicine. And it was allowed to continue for 40 years while people watched. The real lesson of Tuskegee isn't just about informed consent or ethics committees. It's about what happens when we decide that some human beings are worth less than others. When we let prejudice masquerade as science. When we prioritize data over dignity. It's about the ordinary evil of good people doing nothing. I started this by calling Tuskegee a lie. And it was. But it was more than that. It was a betrayal. Of trust. Of humanity. Of everything medicine is supposed to stand for. 600 men were told the government was helping them. They were told they were receiving treatment. They were told they mattered. Every word was a lie. For 40 years they suffered. Their wives suffered. Their children suffered. And the people responsible took notes. That's the story of the Tuskegee Syphilis Study. 40 years of medical racism. 40 years of preventable death. 40 years of science used to justify cruelty. The men are gone now, almost all of them. But their story remains, a reminder of what we're capable of when we forget that every human being deserves dignity, deserves truth, deserves care. We can't undo what happened. We can't give those men back the decades that were stolen from them. We can't restore the trust that was shattered, but we can remember. We can bear witness. We can make sure that when we say never again, we actually mean it. Because somewhere in Tuskegee, Alabama, there's a memorial with 600 names. 600 men who trusted their government and paid for it with their lives. They deserve better than to be forgotten. They deserve better than what they got. And we owe it to them to build a world where no one has to fear their doctor. Where no one has to wonder if they're being treated or experimented on. Where science serves humanity instead of exploiting it. That's the least we can do. That's what we owe to Tuskegee.